Good morning, everyone. This is the lecture for the Jane English essay, Are Most Abortions Moral? There are 2 points I want to make about this little mini lecture. First of all, uh, the essay, Jane English's essay, is fairly clearly written and fairly straightforward, and so I'm not going to make a lot of comments in this lecture. It's going to be a relatively short lecture because I don't want to be too repetitive, and I feel it's fairly intelligible on its own. Second of all, I want to point out that Jane English isn't pushing any particular theoretical approach to the essay. She's not pushing any particular position or conclusion with respect to abortion. She's more interested in sort of taking a survey of our various attitudes and seeing what kinds of ethical intuitions we can draw from our attitudes towards um, certain facts and certain ideas. So that said, um, let's get started. The first point that English makes in her essay is that the morality of abortion should not depend on the personhood of a fetus. Um, the idea uh, that you most often hear in the abortion debate when it's being discussed in the news media or by politicians um, or in other areas of popular culture is that abortion is murder if the fetus is a person, and abortion is perfectly fine and perfectly moral if the fetus is not a person. And Jane English starts off her essay by arguing that in fact this misses the point, that thinking about whether, focusing on whether or not the fetus is a person, sort of entirely misses the point. Our concept of a person is simply too vague and incomplete to help us settle the issue. There is no single feature, nor even a cluster of features, that delineate what a person is. For any and all elements that we can observe, that we can attribute to persons, we can observe non persons that have those elements, and we can observe persons that do not have those elements. And so there's no way to easily settle on whether any particular thing is a person or not. Of course, if there's no way to settle on whether any particular thing is a person or not, then it seems foolish to use personhood as a strong metric or as a main idea in deciding whether something is moral or not. Furthermore, it's possible to morally kill an innocent person. Sometimes killing a person just simply is morally appropriate. Take actions during warfare or self-defense as examples. So abortions can't be all wrong, even if an embryo is a person, because if we find ourselves under conditions in which killing a person is appropriate, then even if an embryo is a person, killing the embryo or the fetus would be appropriate. However, we do often limit what we can do to living things. So even if a fetus isn't a person, you aren't able to do absolutely anything to it. We'll talk about that second condition, about what we are limited in what we can, how limited we are in what we can do to non-persons in a minute. But first, we'd like to stop and consider the possibility of moral killing of persons and consider some examples to shore up that intuition. In at least some pregnancies, uh, English observes, we do believe that abortion is equivalent, or it could be claimed that abortion is equivalent to self-defense. Here are a couple of examples. Imagine that you are being attacked by someone who's been hypnotized and turned into a serial killer, and you are unable to run away from this person. You are unable to disarm this person, but you are able to shoot the person with your gun and thereby end the attack and protect your own life by killing the attacker. Well, in this scenario, um, the moral option is to kill the person. It's clearly a case of self defense. The person is attacking you and will kill you if you don't kill them. And so it looks like in our society, it seems perfectly moral to kill that person. And the fact that the person is hypnotized and being forced to attack you against his will, and therefore that the person is innocent, doesn't really matter. It still seems like it's okay to kill the person. And notice that it's not just in instances where you're being threatened with death, that the person is threatening to cut off a hand or scar your face or do any other significant bodily harm to you, you are entitled to defend yourself and to kill them if that's the only way that you can defend yourself. Well, of course, in the case of pregnancy, there are some pregnancies which unfortunately um, are complicated and are dangerous for the woman carrying the fetus. And if the woman does not obtain an abortion, her life is in jeopardy or her health is in jeopardy. So just like you're entitled to defend yourself from an innocent attacker who's been brainwashed, a woman with uh, a complicated pregnancy or a pregnancy with complications is entitled to defend herself. But the fetus does not have to be a person to be protected. In other words, um, we've just looked at a situation in which even if the fetus is a person, um, there are examples of there are instances in which abortion is moral because uh, there are instances in which it's a self-defense issue for the woman. And you might think that this means that abortion is moral because, well, even if the fetus is a person, abortion is possible, and then sometimes, and of course, if the fetus is not a person, then abortion is always possible. Um, but if the fetus is not a person, that doesn't necessarily mean that the woman can do whatever she wants. There might be some moral obligations involved which limits our ability to do absolutely anything. Since even non-humans, like puppies, are protected from mistreatment, it seems clear that a fetus should have at least some protections. For example, it's illegal and obviously immoral to go around uh, kicking dogs and cats or breaking their legs or chopping off their tails or something like this for no good reason just because it's fun. This would be an obviously immoral behavior. Similarly, a fetus is clearly a living thing, even a very early fetus is clearly a living thing, and therefore a woman carrying a fetus isn't allowed to do absolutely anything she wants. She has to be able to justify it. With other non-person living things like dogs or cows, we feel that we have to justify our behavior, um, and we can't do absolutely anything. And similarly, in a pregnancy, there would be a minimum level of justification expected in order to terminate the pregnancy at the very least. Ultimately, it turns out, whatever the ethical stance we adopt toward abortion, it seems that the best theory will respect our psychological inclination to grant strong rights to very developed fetuses, while acknowledging very undeveloped fetuses have very few protections. In fact, it seems that what actually determines the strength of our moral obligation is really nothing more than whether a fetus or any entity resembles us, that is, resembles adult or largely adult humans. Thus, we feel significantly less moral obligation towards trees, fish, and embryos than we do to dogs and toddlers, because dogs and toddlers resemble us to a large degree, while of course fish and trees and embryos do not. The upshot of all of this is to show that, first of all, again, whether a fetus is a person does not really matter, because there are times when we're entitled to kill persons and to do so morally. And there are times when we're not entitled to kill non-persons, where it would be immoral to kill a non-person because we don't have sufficient reasoning. And so, whatever ethical theory we do eventually endorse, all of these observations have to be respected by that theory. And that, in a nutshell, is Jane English's positions on abortion, or her paper on abortion. Do please go read it if you haven't already done so. There is a lot more information in there than I've covered in this little mini lecture. It's a very interesting essay, and I think a very accessible essay. Next week we'll be doing the last essay, and so there's only one more week. Have a good week, and as always, contact me if you have any questions or concerns.